Anger, one of our most powerful emotions, can derail our best intentions and damage our relationships in mere moments. The ancient Stoic philosophers developed a sophisticated understanding of this emotion and practical techniques to master it that remain remarkably relevant today. This script explores how Stoic philosophy offers a comprehensive framework for understanding and addressing anger issues, providing concrete strategies for transforming our relationship with this challenging emotion. Through the wisdom of thinkers like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, we'll discover that anger management isn't merely about suppression, but about fostering a deeper understanding of ourselves and developing a more rational, measured approach to life's inevitable challenges. Section 1. Understanding anger through the Stoic lens. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, devoted an entire treatise to anger, calling it the most hideous and frenzied of all emotions. The Stoics recognized anger as a cognitive judgment rather than simply an involuntary feeling. According to Stoic psychology, anger arises from our interpretation of events, not the events themselves. When we become angry, the Stoics observe that we make three key judgments. That some harm or disrespect has occurred. That this harm is genuinely bad or unjust. That retaliation is appropriate and justified. These judgments happen almost instantaneously, creating the impression that anger is beyond our control. But the Stoics identified a crucial gap between the triggering event and our emotional response, a space where we can insert rational examination. Epictetus captured this fundamental Stoic insight when he wrote, "People are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them." This perspective shifts our relationship with anger by placing its origin within our control, rather than attributing it to external circumstances. The Stoics also observed the physical manifestations of anger: increased heart rate, flushed face, tight muscles, and shallow breathing. They noted how anger narrows our attention, distorts our perception, and impairs rational thought. Marcus Aurelius described this state as a temporary madness, where our ability to see clearly becomes severely compromised. Understanding anger as a cognitive process rather than an inevitable reaction constitutes the first step toward managing it effectively. This Stoic framework empowers us to recognize that while we may not control triggering events, we maintain full authority over our interpretations and responses. Section 2. The costs of unmanaged anger. The Stoics were keenly aware of anger's destructive potential. Seneca warned that no plague has cost the human race more, recognizing that uncontrolled anger exacts a severe toll on both individuals and society. On a personal level, chronic anger correlates with numerous health problems: increased risk of heart disease, weakened immune function, digestive disorders, headaches, and sleep disturbances. The physiological stress of frequent anger essentially places our bodies in a persistent state of emergency, depleting vital resources needed for health and healing. Beyond physical health, unmanaged anger damages our psychological well-being. It contributes to anxiety, depression, and feelings of guilt and shame after angry episodes. The Stoics recognize that anger often leaves us feeling worse, not better, despite momentary feelings of righteousness or power it might provide. Our relationships suffer tremendously from unchecked anger. Trust erodes when others cannot predict or feel safe around our emotional outbursts. Even when not directed at them, witnessing our anger can make others uncomfortable and defensive. In professional contexts, anger often undermines leadership, cooperation, and effective communication. The Stoics also understood anger's cognitive costs. Anger narrows our perspective, leading to black and white thinking and impaired decision-making. As Seneca observed, reason herself, to whom the reins of power have been entrusted, remains mistress only so long as she is kept apart from the passions. Perhaps most significantly, the Stoics identified how anger prevents personal growth. When we externalize blame through anger, we forfeit opportunities to examine our own contributions to difficult situations. We become trapped in cycles of reactivity rather than developing wisdom through reflection. By clearly recognizing these costs, the Stoics motivate us to take anger management seriously, not as an idealistic philosophical exercise, but as a practical necessity for living well. Section 3. The Stoic Practice of Premeditatio Malorum. One of the most powerful Stoic techniques for managing anger is the practice of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils or difficulties. This exercise involves deliberately imagining challenging situations before they occur, mentally rehearsing calm, rational responses. Seneca advised, "The wise man should prepare in advance for everything that is difficult." By anticipating potentially anger-triggering scenarios, we remove the element of surprise that often intensifies our emotional reactions. When we've mentally rehearsed challenging interactions, we're less likely to react with automatic anger when they actually occur. To practice premeditatio malorum effectively, identify your common anger triggers. These might include specific criticisms, feeling disrespected, interruptions, or particular people who reliably provoke your anger. Set aside time to vividly imagine encountering these triggers. Picture the details, the setting, the words that might be spoken, and the physical sensations that typically accompany your anger response. Mentally rehearse responding with patience and measured rationality rather than anger. Imagine yourself pausing, breathing deliberately, and choosing words carefully. Remind yourself of your deeper values and priorities that anger might compromise. This practice builds what modern psychologists call implementation intentions, specific plans for how to respond in challenging situations. Research confirms that such mental preparation significantly improves our ability to respond skillfully when triggers actually arise. The Stoics understood that this practice works because it creates a psychological buffer zone between trigger and response. As Epictetus put it, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Premeditatio malorum helps us define who we aspire to be when anger threatens, preparing the mind to align with those aspirations even under pressure. Regular practice of this technique gradually rewires our automatic responses. What once triggered immediate anger becomes an opportunity to demonstrate self-mastery, transforming potential anger episodes into moments of purposeful choice. Section 4. The Discipline of Assent, Examining Our Judgments. Central to Stoic anger management is the discipline of assent, the practice of consciously examining and potentially withholding agreement from our initial impressions and judgments. The Stoics recognize that anger doesn't arise directly from events but from our judgments about those events. Epictetus taught that every experience involves two components, the event itself and our judgment about the event. While we cannot control external events, we maintain complete authority over our judgments. When anger begins to rise, the discipline of assent involves pausing to question our automatic interpretations. Identify the judgment fueling the anger. What specific interpretation am I making about this situation? Am I judging that I've been deliberately disrespected? That someone is being intentionally unfair? That something unacceptable has occurred? Question the judgment's accuracy. Is my interpretation certainly true? Am I mind-reading or making assumptions about others' intentions? Am I catastrophizing a minor issue? Have I considered alternative explanations? Evaluate the usefulness of the judgment. Even if my interpretation might be accurate, is this judgment serving me well? Is anger the most effective response to this situation? Reframe through Stoic principles. How would a wise person interpret this situation? What perspective would better serve virtue and tranquility? Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced this discipline, writing to himself, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The discipline of assent doesn't mean denying legitimate problems or concerns. Rather, it involves examining whether our interpretations are accurate and whether anger represents a proportional, useful response. Often, we discover that our judgments contain distortions or assumptions that, once recognized, naturally reduce our anger. With practice, this examination becomes increasingly automatic. We develop the capacity to pause between stimulus and response, creating space to choose our judgments rather than being driven by unconscious reactions. This represents true freedom, what the Stoics recognized as our fundamental power to determine our own mental state regardless of external circumstances. Section 5. The role of perspective in anger management. The Stoics mastered the art of perspective taking as a powerful antidote to anger. They developed specific practices to broaden our viewpoint when anger threatens to narrow it. One key perspective shift involves considering the cosmic view. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself of humanity's tiny place in the vast universe. Soon you will have forgotten all things, and soon all things will have forgotten you. From this expansive perspective, many of our anger triggers appear insignificant. The Stoics also advocated considering the impermanence of our concerns. Marcus wrote, "Time is a river, a violent current of events, glimpsed once and already carried past us, and another follows and is gone." Contemplating how quickly today's provocations will fade in importance helps reduce their emotional impact. Another perspective technique involves empathic understanding. Epictetus taught, "When someone irritates you, know that your own opinion is what irritates you." The Stoics encouraged considering others' viewpoints and motivations, recognizing that people rarely act with the deliberate malice we often attribute to them. Most often, others act from their own limited understanding, fear, or perceived necessity. A powerful perspective shift involves the dichotomy of control, distinguishing between what we can and cannot influence. Epictetus began his Enchiridion with this fundamental principle: some things are within our power, while others are not. Anger frequently arises when we fail to accept what lies beyond our control. By refocusing on what we can influence, primarily our own responses, we naturally reduce anger. The Stoics also recommended projecting ourselves into the future to gain perspective. Seneca advised imagining how we might view the current situation years hence. Will it still seem worth the emotional distress we're experiencing now? Finally, the Stoics practiced comparative perspective, considering others who face greater challenges with equanimity. This doesn't invalidate our difficulties but helps calibrate our emotional responses proportionally. These perspective practices don't eliminate appropriate concern for genuine problems but transform unproductive anger into wisdom. Through regular practice, we develop what Epictetus called the art of acquiescence, accepting reality as it is while focusing our energy on constructive responses rather than angry resistance. Section 6. Daily Practices for Cultivating Anger Resilience. The Stoics recognized that managing anger requires consistent practice rather than mere theoretical understanding. They developed practical daily exercises to strengthen emotional resilience. Morning preparation. Marcus Aurelius began each day by anticipating challenges. Begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." This mental rehearsal prepared him to meet difficulties with equanimity rather than surprise and anger. Mindful pause. The Stoics advocated inserting a deliberate pause when anger begins to rise. Seneca recommended, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Modern research confirms this wisdom, showing that even a brief pause can interrupt the automatic anger cycle. Practices like counting to 10 or taking several deep breaths create this crucial space. Physical self-care. The Stoics understood the connection between physical and emotional states. They recognized that hunger, exhaustion, and physical discomfort lower our threshold for anger. Regular exercise, adequate sleep, and proper nutrition formed part of their anger management strategy. Evening reflection. Seneca recommended ending each day with honest self-examination. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. This practice builds self-awareness about anger patterns and triggers. Voluntary discomfort. The Stoics deliberately practiced enduring minor discomforts to build frustration tolerance. Seneca advised occasionally eating plain food, wearing simpler clothes, or sleeping on a harder surface, not as punishment but as training in resilience. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, we raise our threshold for annoyance and anger. Nature contemplation. Marcus Aurelius regularly refreshed his perspective by contemplating natural processes. Observing nature's patterns, the changing seasons, flowing water, or night sky, helps restore proportionality and calm when petty concerns have inflamed our anger. Memorizing maxims. The Stoics internalized short philosophical sayings to recall during challenging moments. Epictetus suggested, "This circumstance is the stern trainer that I needed," or, "Is this something within my control?" Such memorized phrases become mental anchors during emotional turbulence. By integrating these practices into daily life, the Stoics transformed anger management from a reactive struggle into a proactive discipline. Rather than merely fighting anger once it arises, they systematically cultivated the internal conditions that naturally reduce anger's frequency and intensity. Section 7. Communication Strategies from Stoic Wisdom. While much of Stoic anger management focuses on internal practices, the philosophy also offers sophisticated guidance for communicating during potentially inflammatory situations. The Stoics emphasized honesty without hostility. Epictetus advised speaking the truth with kindness, or not at all. This principle recognizes that truthful communication need not be delivered with anger or judgment. The goal is to convey our perspective clearly while maintaining respect for others' dignity. When anger arises in conversations, the Stoics recommended temporary withdrawal rather than reactive response. Seneca wrote, "The first thing is not to get angry. The next, to cease from anger." Sometimes this requires physically removing oneself from a heated situation until composure returns. The Stoics also practiced perspective-taking during difficult conversations. Marcus Aurelius advised, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." This wasn't cynicism but preparation, recognizing that others act according to their own nature and current understanding, not to deliberately frustrate us. Stoic communication minimizes blaming language. Instead of accusatory, "you" statements, "You always interrupt me," Stoics would frame concerns in terms of observable behaviors and personal impacts. When conversations are interrupted, I find it difficult to express my complete thought. The philosophy also emphasizes focusing on current issues rather than cataloging past grievances. Seneca noted that anger often compounds because we add to it all the previous instances that have angered us. Stoic communication stays present-focused, addressing the immediate situation without escalating through historical grievances. Perhaps most importantly, Stoic communication maintains firm boundaries without anger. The Stoics recognize that we can assert our needs and values clearly without the emotional charge of anger. Epictetus taught that we can decline requests, express disagreement, or establish consequences while maintaining inner tranquility. These communication practices reflect the Stoic understanding that productive dialogue requires both internal management of our emotions and skillful external expression. By communicating with clarity, respect, and emotional regulation, we create conditions for resolution rather than escalation. Section 8. Stoicism and Modern Anger Management Techniques. The Stoic approach to anger management harmonizes remarkably well with contemporary psychological interventions, offering a philosophical foundation that enriches modern techniques. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, one of today's most effective approaches for anger management, shares fundamental principles with Stoicism. Both emphasize examining the thoughts that generate emotions and recognize the connection between beliefs and emotional responses. When a CBT therapist helps clients identify cognitive distortions, they're essentially applying the Stoic discipline of assent, questioning automatic judgments that fuel anger. Mindfulness practices, now widely used in anger management programs, parallel the Stoic emphasis on present-moment awareness. The Stoic practice of prosoke, attention, involve maintaining conscious awareness of our thoughts and impressions, similar to mindfulness meditation. Both approaches create space between triggering events and our responses. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, techniques for emotional regulation, including skills like opposite action and check the facts, have clear analogs in Stoic practices. When DBT encourages clients to act contrary to anger impulses, it echoes Epictetus's advice to counter passionate reactions with their opposites. Modern stress management techniques often focus on addressing the physiological components of anger through breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, and physical activity, approaches compatible with the Stoic recognition of the mind-body connection. Social skills training in contemporary anger management programs teaches assertion without aggression, paralleling the Stoic emphasis on expressing needs clearly while maintaining emotional equilibrium. Both approaches distinguish between assertiveness, aligned with virtue, and aggressiveness, driven by passion. What Stoicism uniquely contributes to modern approaches is an integrated philosophical framework that addresses not just techniques but the fundamental question of what constitutes a well-lived life. While contemporary approaches focus primarily on symptom reduction, Stoicism embeds anger management within a comprehensive ethical system. For those engaged with modern therapeutic approaches, Stoic philosophy offers a complementary wisdom tradition that can deepen understanding and motivation. The Stoic emphasis on virtue, character development, and rational living provides a meaningful context for the sometimes mechanical techniques of contemporary interventions. This integration of ancient philosophy and modern psychology offers a more complete approach to anger management, addressing both practical techniques and the deeper questions of values and meaning that ultimately shape our emotional lives. Section 9. Transforming anger into constructive action. The Stoics did not advocate eliminating all strong emotions but rather transforming them into rational motivations aligned with virtue. When it comes to anger, their goal was to channel its energy into constructive action rather than destructive reaction. Seneca distinguished between anger and legitimate moral concern. Will the wise man not be angry if he sees his father murdered or his mother outraged? He answered that the wise person would feel appropriate pain and motivation to seek justice, but without the distortion and rashness of anger. This transformation involves converting raw anger into principled concern. The Stoic approach involves several key steps. Pause and create distance from the initial anger trigger. This might involve physical separation, deep breathing, or simply mental distancing through perspective taking. Identify the legitimate concern beneath the anger. What principle or value feels threatened or violated? What appropriate desire is being frustrated? This shifts focus from the raw feeling to the underlying issue. Consider virtuous responses that address the legitimate concern. What action would demonstrate wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance in this situation? How can I respond effectively rather than reactively? Formulate a measured response based on principle rather than passion. This involves clear-headed consideration of consequences and alignment with your deeper values. Marcus Aurelius practiced this transformation when he wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Rather than seeing anger as a source of power, the Stoics recognize that calm, principled action demonstrates true strength. This approach doesn't mean passivity or indifference to genuinely problematic situations. The Stoics were active participants in social and political life, working to address injustice and improve society. What distinguishes their approach is maintaining rational clarity while addressing problems, rather than allowing anger to distort judgment and action. Modern applications of this Stoic principle include channeling potential anger about social injustice into organized activism, transforming anger about workplace problems into strategic problem solving, or converting relationship frustrations into clear communication about needs and boundaries. By transforming anger's raw energy into principled action, we maintain effectiveness while avoiding anger's destructive aspects. This represents not the suppression of emotional energy but its elevation into a more rational, constructive form. Section 10. Stoic forgiveness and moving forward. The Stoic approach to anger culminates in practices of forgiveness and forward movement, not as acts of moral superiority but as expressions of wisdom and psychological freedom. Marcus Aurelius advised, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This perspective recognizes that harboring anger ultimately harms ourselves more than others. By cultivating forgiveness, we free ourselves from the psychological burden of sustained anger and resentment. The Stoic concept of forgiveness differs from simply excusing wrongdoing. It involves understanding that others act according to their nature and current understanding. As Marcus reflected, when another blames you or hates you, or people voice similar criticisms, go to their souls, penetrate inside and see what sort of people they are. You will realize that there is no need to be racked with anxiety that they should hold any particular opinion about you. This cognitive reframing, recognizing that others' actions reflect their limitations rather than our worth, naturally diminishes anger without requiring us to condone harmful behavior. Epictetus taught that understanding causality leads naturally to forgiveness. Remember that he who does wrong against himself. And remember that the Supreme Court of all requires you to forgive, as they are ignorant and err unwillingly. This perspective recognizes that holding on to anger punishes ourselves for others' actions. Stoic forgiveness involves several practical steps. Acknowledge the full impact of the offense and allow yourself to process the natural emotional response. Consider the universal human tendency toward error and limitation. As Seneca noted, to err is human, and to repeat the same error is more than human. Reflect on your own mistakes and times when you've needed forgiveness, cultivating humility that facilitates extending understanding to others. Consciously choose to relinquish the burden of resentment, not primarily for the other's benefit but for your own psychological freedom. Focus on constructive future action rather than dwelling on past injuries. This approach doesn't preclude establishing boundaries or seeking justice when appropriate. The Stoics recognize that we can take necessary protective measures without the emotional burden of sustained anger. Ultimately, Stoic forgiveness represents a form of emotional efficiency, recognizing that carrying anger forward serves no constructive purpose. By practicing forgiveness, we free mental and emotional resources for more worthwhile pursuits, demonstrating the core Stoic principle that our inner state remains our own responsibility regardless of external events. Conclusion. The Stoic approach to anger management offers not merely techniques for emotional control but a comprehensive philosophy for living well amidst life's inevitable challenges. By understanding anger as a product of our judgments rather than external circumstances, we reclaim agency over our emotional life. Through practices like premeditation of difficulties, examination of judgments, perspective-taking, and daily resilience exercises, we gradually transform our relationship with this powerful emotion. The Stoic message is ultimately one of hope and possibility. No matter our temperament or past relationship with anger, the capacity for transformation lies within our reach. Through consistent practice and philosophical reflection, even those with the strongest anger tendencies can develop greater emotional resilience and wisdom. As we integrate Stoic practices into our daily lives, we may find that anger's grip loosens not through suppression but through genuine transformation, converting raw emotional reactivity into principled, constructive action. In this process, we discover what the Stoics considered life's ultimate achievement: not perfect tranquility, but harmony between our emotional responses and our rational understanding of what truly matters.